Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online at WSGW.com. Here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Well, good evening and welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I am your host, Kareem Bowen, and I'm so glad that you guys have tuned in once again for another conversation on race in America. We have in the studio with us the main man, my producer, the Rob Father. Rob, why don't we give a shout out to the people?
Hey, what's up, United Shades of Great audience? Happy to be here. Happy to see you again, Kareem.
All right, so those of you who are tuned in, you know this is WSGW 100.5 and 790 AM. It's a simulcast. We are here, and we're going to talk to you today about the criminal justice system, a tale of two Americas. And so we'll have an interesting conversation, Rob. I noticed a little bit of excitement or anticipation in your voice.
Well, Charles Dickens, you know, Tales of Two Cities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I want to get right into our conversation this evening with you all. There is a lot that is happening around the nation. 3 or 4, I can't keep up with them, major cases. And I was like, why is all of this coming at the same time? But we noticed that we have to remember that in 2020, there were no cases that were being heard by court systems because everything was shut down because of the pandemic. And so there's a lot that's on the backlog. And when I looked at Charlottesville, the Unite the Right still being on the docket, it seems like that was years ago, and we're just now getting around to the actual case itself. So let's talk about what's hot off the press. Let's talk about those issues of the day. Actually, the cases that we'll talk about are the issues of the day, but I want to talk about those in a different context, Rob. All right, so today I want us to take a look. The sale is on, Rob. We talked about that infrastructure bill that the Democrats were trying to put together. That has been so frustrating to me. I know the rest of America must feel the same way. Looking at this thing coming in at $1.2 trillion, just for infrastructure, $550 billion in new funding, transportation, bridges, roads, broadband, utilities. All of these things will be a part of the process. I think that's really exciting, and it'll be good for our country. But Rob, you know, we're also looking at what happens when we begin to talk about this whole concept of inflation. I told you, inflation. There's no way that we could deal with those things. Inflation is on the rise. Everything's increasing. We're still at the same place that we were as it relates to, I guess, you know, we're looking at the housing market, which is cooling down. I would think that in December, there's probably going to be a number of moratoriums on mortgages that are probably going to go into effect if they already have not started to do so. And so there is a lot that is going to be happening in America, and it's crazy. They were saying just now, because of the shipping systems and the backlog of the tankers that can't get in to bring in supplies and different things, that baby formula is now going to be an issue. So there's a lot that happens, I guess, when you stop an economy for a year, a global economy, not just the U.S., and then you jumpstart that economy, and you know, you're having to start and stop. We see Europe is going through some crazy things as it relates to COVID. They're hitting. This has just been crazy, and the anticipation what's happening, Rob, is just beyond me. But the great sale is on with those plummeting poll numbers. Where is he at now, Rob? 30-something%? Is it 34 or something?
I think it was close to 30 something or 37. I think it's the last time I looked at it. But just to remind you that Clinton went through the same thing.
But never this low. This is almost like a historic low.
I'm still pessimistic, a bit positive rather, to keep a positive outlook on the whole thing. You know, he'll bounce back. You know,
absolutely.
Because remember, he's dealing with not just him, but everyone's dealing with this whole COVID thing, and we're dealing with this tug of war between should I get vaccinated, should I not get vaccinated. I don't want to get vaccinated. I don't have the, you can't tell me what to do with my body thing. There's a whole struggle here. At the same time, we're doing hospitals fill up and things of that sort. So he has to deal with all of this at the same time.
And Rob, not to mention, you know, if you can't get anything passed in legislation and you hold two bodies of Congress and the White House in control, and you can't get your people on the same page to vote for something unified. That's a bad look. And for him to be the great, it is a bad look because it.
Well, we have people who dissented before that anyway. You have 2 Democrats who were dissenting,
well, I get that,
and the Senate is only held by a slim margin only because the vice president.
And I do take into consideration that we have those red state Democrats out there, and so they have to worry about, I guess, being reelected more so than what's best for America. But that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother conversation because I thought the whole purpose for going to the seat.
Throwing shade much there?
Not very much. It's a little shady over here. Summer's not completely gone. I'll just say that, okay?
Okay.
But we look at this and I'm just kind of like, okay, so now they're out. The surrogates are out. Something that's coming out of this, which is kind of interesting, and this is not even where I wanted to go, but something you said brought it up. We see the president out. He's going to be selling this package because he's got to get those numbers up. The Build Better
program he has to do. That's the second part of his package.
What's that?
The Build Better.
The Build Back Better. This is the key piece of his legislation to make America, build us back stronger and better and bolster greatness once again. It's all crazy. But what's interesting is, so he's on this political tour now to share. We've passed this. This is what it means. Monies are coming. Things are changing. Changes on the way. Help is on the way. Cavalry's coming. And it's really because the poll numbers were, I think, at 34% approval rating. Do you think he's doing a good job? 34% of Americans are saying, hey, this dude is all right. But so they're out selling this program. Now, what's been interesting, and this week it came into to light, and I'd been thinking about this. Where in the world is our vice president? I don't think I've ever seen a vice president.
Oh, come on now.
No. Hold on.
Presidents are kind of in the background anyway.
Rob, I get it. And it is a ceremonial position at best. I get it. But it's never seemed so ceremonial as it is this year.
I don't know. I disagree.
Okay, well, the story is being told that there is some distinction in the ranks within the White House. And what I had noticed is that we had not seen our vice president. I can't tell you the last time I saw her. And so there was some concern from her office that she's not being utilized, that she's not being given, fully utilized and given the opportunity to shine. And if you were to think initially when this whole thing started, Mr. Biden said he was only going to run for one term. And so if he's going to run one term, elections are in 2022 midterms, and then we got the 2024 presidential election, it would seem that he would be positioning her to be his predecessor. But maybe old Joe's made a decision, hey, I'm going to be 84 and I'm going to be the oldest president we've ever had in the union. I don't know what it is, but she's finally come out. She's on the stumping trail, pushing this agenda to help those devastating approval rating numbers. But I think that this getting something done is going to be huge. I know that there's also something for veterans that are returning to make sure that they get the assistance that they need. That will also be a bipartisan vote. And that's key. This vote was bipartisan. So I have to, even though I'm kind of hard, I have to also give them credit for being able to pull together a bipartisan package for what we're talking about. All right, let's get past that. All right. COVID is is roaring through Michigan. Michigan now leads the nation in COVID cases, Rob. I was looking at those numbers on yesterday, and it's absolutely staggering. 17,000 new cases in one day. We're not talking nationally. We're talking about the state of Michigan. We are currently, as it is, at the same point that we were this time last year in the heat of the pandemic. And the fear is because of our anti-vaxxer mandates or anti-vaxxer stance, a lot of misinformation and miseducation, and just lethargy over wearing masks and mitigation control. People are like, I'm over this. Let's get through it. But the fact of the matter is, Rob, these numbers and these are just going through the roof, astronomical. And we're seeing hospitals that are reaching their capacities. Numbers are coming in regularly. People are dying. I need you to understand this. There are people that are dying on a regular basis because of this COVID pandemic that is still underway. And the scary thing is, Rob, we are just entering into the cold months. We've been blessed so far that we've been getting a lot of rain and mild weather. but we are now entering into the Thanksgiving season. Families are gathering, people are getting together. We're going to have probably Black Friday. I would imagine that will be a thing again this year. People in the stores, a lot of people have resorted to online buying, getting those discounts. But that means that people are going to be out around together in closed spaces. And this is only a recipe for disaster. Rob, what are your thoughts as we look at what is soon to come and what could possibly happen with what we would now consider our fourth surge here in the state of Michigan?
We're going to be in the same rut as we were before, especially with there being confusion with the booster shot information. People are not sure which way to go with that. And the CDC has admitted that there's been some confusion. They're trying to fix that. And we still, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there's this tug of war situation where we don't know, where people are saying, I don't want to get vaccinated, I will get vaccinated. And then you don't know who is vaccinated. And those who lie about it,
yeah,
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
And say that
come on, Mr. Aaron Rodgers. Come on. In our mind, Mr. Rogers was all that guy that was always slightly creepy to me to some degree. But he was the man that America loved. He took off the sweater, he took off the shoes, and he brought America together. He was about truth telling. Not about lying about vaccinations. Come on, man.
But he's just a small example of the people who are doing that. So I don't know where I go to certain spaces, whether who's vaccinated, who's not. I don't want to wear the mask anymore than I have to. However, I'm doing what I have to do because I want to protect myself. Even though I've been vaccinated, I've got the booster shot. So far, my health has been great. I haven't suffered any symptoms from either of those shots, whatnot. And my health has been good. I even got my flu shot like I did every year.
Man, Rob, you are just a walking
Superman
poster child.
That's right, baby.
For vaccinations in here. I've never been a flu shot person. I've always responded well to the flu. Not that I'm anti my family, those members that need it, get it. And, I say, hey, do what you need to get done. However, we have now, we saw that St. Mary's Hospital, St. Mary's Ascension here in Saginaw has their expiration date has come up for their mandatory vaccines.
Oh, really?
For all of their work that happened on the 12th of this month. I had been kind of talking with their workers and examining what would take place, man, and it's absolutely crazy.
So back to your question as to what's going to happen then, are we going to be in the same situation as we were last year or worse? Because we still have the Delta variant still.
Well, this is the thing with that. So this expired on the 12th. That means that they were poised to lose a good third of their healthcare staff. So I was thinking to myself, okay, these individuals are clearly going to leave St. Mary's Ascension and they'll probably find work over at Covenant Healthcare Systems. Surgeons, doctors, nurses,
right.
All of these individuals that were saying, listen, we're not doing this. And so it expired. A number of those people were escorted to the door and they walked off. And so now we are currently dealing with a situation where Covenant just released that if by December 6th, you are not vaccinated, have not had the first shot of your vaccine, because it's 6, you take, you get your first one, and then a month later or 3 weeks later, you get your second dose. And that second dose, I think, is by January 6th, that they are now it's a mandate. Before it was a strong request, but now it is a mandate. And so we're going to see that we're going to lose healthcare workers there as well. And which is accompanying the fact that in the wintertime, we have those accidents, broken bones, collisions, slip and falls, all of the issues that exist.
Excuse me, Kareem. When you say mandate, is it mandatory to get the vaccine or mandate that they either get the vaccine or they go in every day? That is the
mandate. If you either get the mandate, you either get the vaccine or you're no longer a Covenant employee.
Okay, so you don't have a choice to get tested every day.
No. And that's what St. Mary's Ascension just did.
Okay.
And they allowed them to walk. And so now we see the same thing happening at Covenant. And so I'm just trying to figure out who is going to take care of those who are now going to be in our hospital. Mm-hmm. So a hospital that has already been stressed and strained with a lack of people that are able to be there. But I understand the philosophy. If I'm coming to the hospital, the least I should not be looking to come to the hospital to catch COVID. And to die from COVID because I caught it from a staff member who has COVID. Right. And, that's exactly how my cousin died January of last year. I think it was just after the insurrection on January 6th. He passed away. He caught COVID during Thanksgiving from a family gathering, never rebounded back, and he died January of 2021. And so I guess I understand that we want to make sure that our healthcare officials are not the place, or healthcare institutions are not the place where people are getting sick and dying, but it happens. And so now we're going to see what takes place on December 6th as it relates to the Covenant healthcare system. And, this is going to be interesting, Rob, to see what takes place there. Since we're talking about January 6th, let's just go there.
All right.
The special commission, we were talking about this on last week, Rob. Steve Bannon, he defied his subpoena to show up before Congress to testify. And, we saw this even with not the 9/11, but the, the Russia Commission, the whole thing about, what was taking place with Russia and Ukraine, that people were defying those subpoenas and nothing happened. So I think that America had kind of thought like, oh, they'll give us a subpoena if they don't want to show up. They just won't. And they were being encouraged not to do so. So now Steve is held in contempt and is threatened with a possible year in prison.
Right. I think he's been not only been indicted, but I think he's ready to surrender himself.
Yeah. But this past week he has now turned the corner because they said, look, we're enforcing this. This is not the Congress of old. We're not doing that same thing again. Mm-hmm. And so now we're waiting to see what happens with Mark Meadows. He has responded. He no longer wants to be in jail for a year. And they've sent out some questions that they want asked. At the end of the day, this is so heartbreaking in terms of what we're seeing. So many people want to say that America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, that we are United States of America. And we're seeing such great divisiveness in our nation that it's concerning. And I believe that the founding fathers of this union, even though they didn't consider us to be a part of this union at the time that they were forming it, are probably turning over in their graves. So hopefully they enforce these things. Nobody should be above the law, regardless of where you are and what you do. So we're going to put a pin in those things right there, Steve, Rob, and we want to get to the heart of our conversation on today. We're going to talk about the criminal justice system, a tale of two Americas. And before we get to the trials at our hand, because we're going to talk about, there's so many big trials that are going on, so many crazy things that are happening, so many judges that are a part of this process, the attorneys, the complaints, the requests for mistrials, that I think that this is worth us having a whole conversation about. So that's what we're going to get in here and talk about. And we're going to begin, because I want to just say from police to parole, Black and white Americans differ wildly in their views of the criminal justice system. This has always been a great point of contention. Black Americans are far more likely than whites to say that the nation's criminal justice system is racially biased and that its treatment of minorities is a serious national problem. Now, we talked a lot about racial bias, a few weeks ago, Rob, but for those who are here that maybe did not catch those conversations, when we're talking about bias, it's important to state and to understand that everyone that lives and exists has bias. It's impossible to live and not have bias. It's those preconceived ideas, those things that we have based upon where we're from, how we've been raised, the experiences that we had, if we've had positive or negative experiences that we cover, that we carry with us, that really paint a picture or show us and give some favor or disadvantage to people as we look at them as individuals. All right. And usually those things are tied to a social construct of who these people are on a larger perspective. All right. So we looked at a Pew Research Center survey, and 9 in 10 Black Americans, that's about 87%, said that Blacks are generally treated less fairly by the criminal justice system than whites. And the view shared by a much smaller majority of whites, 61% in the same survey. So when we look at this, there is a huge difference. And Rob, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts as it relates to this difference in terms of how we view the criminal justice system? Why is it that 87% of Blacks says that we're treated much differently than 79% of the whites are saying?
Well, a lot of it,
or 61, excuse me.
A lot of it still, in my view, has a lot to do with race, but some of it has to do with the ability to afford legal representation. The more money you have, because you can't really put it all on race. Because I mean, you look at some of the people who are high level names, like for example, R. Kelly, or Bill Cosby.
Did you just say R. Kelly on my show,
Yeah.
Rob? I believe you brought up that man on my show.
Well, I didn't use the D word with the DJT.
Well, I think it's interesting. He wrote a song and he's going to prison. I don't see nothing wrong with a little bump and grind. No pun intended. But
these people have have lots of money, and they can afford the lawyers that they can. O.J. Simpson go way back, some 20, 30 years almost.
Yeah.
So if you have the money, you can afford it. But the reason why a lot of us men and women are instituted the way we are incarcerated as we are is because we don't have the funds to afford the proper legal representation, and or to get a trial moved from one judge to another judge based on the influence that's available. So that's why we are where we are today, as far as that's concerned.
Well,
one of the reasons why we are.
I agree, and what we saw, you brought up OJ, and I'll have the conversation because OJ is OJ. What OJ showed us was that even though I believe that there's a strong bias in the criminal justice system, that the social economic aspect of this thing, when we look at financial, if you got money as a black man, you're more likely to get a better treatment than a person who does not have money. And so there is an economic disadvantage that also exists that we also take like. So poor white folks often get a similar treatment as, middle class black people. And if you broke and you're a black man, then you tend to be at the bottom of the system. This is really the pervasive view that many people have. I'm going to take a quick break because I've been waiting, Rob, for this information that just came in. Saginaw standout, Ty Rogers, has, I think, made an announcement in terms of the team that he is going to be playing with. And so I think that's going to be interesting. I just want to make sure that this has been confirmed. So we'll see. They're confirming it for me, but he's made a decision, and this is really big. After Jason Richardson, Draymond Green, those guys coming out of the city, going to the NBA, he would be another great name that is going out there into the community. So it's going to be very interesting. So we're going to continue this conversation, Rob. One more statistic before we go to this break. That same survey from Pew Research said that 79% of blacks compared to 32% of whites said that the way racial and ethnic minorities are treated by criminal justice system is a very big problem in the United States. That's a huge disparity, Rob. 79% of blacks, 30% of whites. When we look at that, why do we think that happens, Rob? That's a huge disparity.
Oh, yes.
So why do you think we see these numbers? And do you agree with what you're saying? 79%. Would you say that ethnic minorities are being treated differently in the criminal justice system than whites?
I think it depends on the area of the country.
Okay.
I can't say without looking at all the data itself, but I think it depends on the area of the country. The poor area of the country maybe for South, or depending on which city or rural areas there is, that may be true in some instances. I don't think it's that be the same case in California. For example.
You got to give me an area. So in an area where this is true.
So North Philadelphia, or for example, versus Houston, Texas, for example,
okay,
or Los Angeles, California, where there's a whole lot of big money flying around there, versus Atlanta, Georgia, versus someplace in Connecticut or New Hampshire, whereas majority of whites up there than are blacks.
But the story is that particular area portion of the country tends to be a bit more racially open as it relates to race.
Right.
There's still a lot of issues when you get to Boston and Massachusetts.
I was going to mention Massachusetts.
Absolutely. So it has been announced.
But now Boston has a black mayor now, I believe.
Yeah. So there's a lot of changing dynamics, but race is a major factor. Somebody said a black man ain't got nobody except Jesus. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to get into this conversation.
Atheists, maybe we don't have anybody there.
We're going to continue this conversation about race, but I want to give that. It has been posted. Our Saginaw standout, Ty Rogers, is officially going to the Great School of Illinois. Sorry, fellow Spartans, we did not catch this one, but congratulations, Ty. We wish you the best as you move forward and make great things happen. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. We'll be back with more United Shades of Grey.
United Shades of Gray will continue on WSGW. Welcome to United Shades of Gray. You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
Hello, this is Kareem, and we're back from our commercial break. Thank you, Rob, for bringing us through the stormy weather of advertising. All right, so we're going to get back to our conversation. We announced on the other side of this, it's official. It's been posted to social media. Saginaw standout Ty Rogers will officially be playing with the Illinois University. So fighting Illinois is going to be interesting. Michigan State, great job. You guys did a wonderful job, I believe, at the recruiting process. Hey, you can't win them all. We're back to the conversation, and I wanted to continue these statistics because, Rob, at the end of giving out this information, we're going to also, I want us to get into some of the cases, the high profile cases that we're looking at. And we're going to see, is race a major factor, and see some things in there that are really quite different and things that we've never really seen before in America's criminal justice system, the way that we're seeing these things. Okay. So I want to talk about the crime. So crime in America, Black adults in the U.S. consistently express more concern than white adults about crime. In our pre-election poll, that took place last year, 3/4, that's 46%, 3/4, that's 76%, compared to 46% said that violent crime was a big problem in their community, in the country. 82% of Blacks said gun violence is a very big problem. For just 47% of white Americans. We're going to get to this conversation about what's taking place right now because these cases are high profile. When we look at policing, Rob, this is probably one of the areas of the most pronounced differences between blacks and whites. And I, by no means, I come from a paramilitary policing family in law enforcement and policing and the armed services. And so I salute my fellow guys. We just celebrated Veterans Day, and there were so many family members that I was able to salute and thank them for their service. But when we look at this, 72% of African Americans and 84% on a real big national scale feel that there is a serious problem with how police officers do their job. And when we say that, we're talking about, is the amount of force that being used correct? Is in terms of how they are surveillancing or profiling individuals consistent, or is there a racial bias? Those types of things compared to just I think it was 42% of white Americans feel that there's a problem in the policing area. So there's a serious issue there. And I think that what we have seen in the past year, especially in the year of 2020, has shown us a great deal of things going on. What are you going to say, Rob?
I like to look at it on a logical aspect of it. Well, the question actually, are we talking about, we say police, and we must talk about, are these all white police officers, or are these a mixture of racially diverse? Because there are black police officers also who are doing the same thing to black people, white officers who do the same thing to white people. So how are we breaking this down?
And that is true. But the reality of the situation is that when we look at this, we're looking at the majority of police officers being our white individuals. And so when they look at this, they're looking at police officers, regardless of their race or ethnicity. But the system, it's the system of policing, not necessarily if they're black officers or white officers, but the system of policing. And you have to understand, there was a situation.
I played devil's advocate with that, because that is a question when we talk about policing. We have to determine whether or not, well, we do see corrupt black police officers, and we do see corrupt white people. But I don't want America to think that as a black person, we think that all officers who are white are against us, kind of deal.
And I think I stated that at the beginning. Right. I am a person who leans in. I believe that police officers have a very important role in the community, but their role must be clearly defined. I think that one issue is that we often have officers that are serving in communities that they're afraid of.
Right.
And if you're afraid of me, there's no way that you can protect and serve me.
Right.
And so there are a lot of issues that go on. So I'm by no means the one who's saying defund the police or, kill the police. That is not me. That's not my role. But I think that there are a lot of issues in our criminal justice system, especially in the system of policing, that are problematic. If you think about it, just this past week, there was a situation, I believe is in South Carolina, where there was a police officer. They hired their first black police officer on their staff. And actually, the chief had been saying, we would never hire a N-word on this police force as long as I'm alive.
Wow.
And they hired their first one, and he came in, and the police officer made jokes. I think he came in and he had a noose that was placed on some of the stuff that he was done by the police officer. And the reason we know this is because they had cameras, and he was on camera while he was doing this.
It sounds like a TV show I saw years ago.
It sounds like something that is out of the 50s or the 60s. And this is the thing that is so disheartening, Rob,
right,
is because there are so many people that will not, this is not how it used to be. We're different now. But there are parts of America that are still laden and beholden to the systems and the ideologies of our past that have to be overturned.
Right.
And if we can't take a real look at ourselves and what we're allowing to take place in our nation, then we become a part of that problem. And so it's important for us to make sure that we do these things. So when we talk about that, we're talking about policing as a whole. You're looking up I thought you were looking up that particular county that was in, but I saw it. It was absolutely. The police chief even said this, and these are those things that are not funny that we've heard and jokes I've heard before. He rolled up to the black officer who was in the car with another black officer. And, they were sitting there, and he says, "Oh, I rolled my window down." They said, "Well, we rolled our window down a while ago." He says, "I thought they were still up. We thought your windows were tinted." Referring to the fact that the two black guys in there, because they were dark, they made the windows look like they were tinted. So it's these types of microaggressions and overt actions that many people are still existing and experiencing in our nation. So we've got to begin to take a look at that. So as it relates to the death penalty, and we're going to get to these cases, 54% of Americans support a death penalty. When we break those down by race, about 36% of blacks would do that, and nearly 6 in 10 whites, 59%, agree to the death penalty. I'm gonna tell you why. You know the reason why many blacks don't agree to the death penalty.
Yes, I do.
Okay. On last week, we were talking about the Innocence Project. And one of those things was that there are thousands of cases where black men have been incarcerated, at the testimony of a couple of white people, or maybe one white woman. And so there are a lot of them that understand that if we're incarcerated, we're killing people based upon these fraudulent testimonies and fraudulent trials with fraudulent information, lack of DNA, and then we're killing a lot of innocent people. So that is one key issue there. I think that there's a lot to be desired. I think that we are making strides. I think the majority of America wants things to be right, but I think that we are fearful of what real change means, and that fear causes us to stay in places that are comfortable for us. All right, so voting rights for ex-felons. The majority of America feels like, hey, if you have paid a crime, paid the time, done the time, you should be free from the crime. All right, so Rob, I want to take the few minutes remaining in our show today, and I want to have some real conversation about what we see taking place. We've already talked about the 9/11 Commission and the insurrection on the nation on last week that's taking place in Congress. But there are 3 trials that we're going to talk about that are taking place right now. There's the trial in Charlottesville, the Unite the Right trial that took place that murdered one protester, Heather Heyer. She was hit by the vehicle. Right. This seems so far ago, but it's now in the court systems. There's the trial of Ahmaud Arbery, which we'll talk about.
Oh, yes.
Young black man running in his own community, and he was killed, shot and dead like a deer on the side of the road. But we're going to start right here with Kyle Rittenhouse, and that's because this particular trial is the one that's in deliberation right now. The jury we're awaiting a verdict from the jury. They were in deliberation 8 hours on yesterday. The judge says, hey, we're going to make you, in control of this. You have full control. They had 18 jurors. They have now narrowed them down to 12. We saw that on this past week, there were additional charges that were added.
We must point out that as unusual, and every lawyer in America has said this, that Mr. Rittenhouse was able to choose the jurors who were going to decide his fate. I had never seen anything like that.
This is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I don't understand that.
Rob, you didn't even allow me to get there.
I'm sorry, America. I'm pissed.
But since you put it out there, because we're going to talk about disparities, okay? So these 18
How does that even happen? I don't understand.
These 18 jurors have now been narrowed to 12. Additional charges we saw come in, lesser charges, because we understand if they're afraid to send him life imprisonment or all these other things, then let's put some other charges in there that we can get him found guilty on, so he doesn't get off scot-free. Those additional charges were what? Provocation was the key thing. So provocation, along with the smaller charges, and provocation simply means that I cannot claim self-defense if I am the individual. If I go out and I am an integral part of this entire thing taking place, the fact that I'm in a county that is away, I'm in a state that is not the state that I live in, I'm there for the purpose of rebel rousing. I carry my assault rifle because I'm there because we're going to shoot some protesters and protect our country. Then you are creating and setting the stage for a crime or this incident to take place. And so it's hard for you to now say self-defense when you have now been the key person or the proponent for creating the atmosphere for this thing to take place.
I got 3 listed here for you.
What's that?
I got 3 of them here listed for you.
Go ahead. Why don't you give them to us?
Count 1, first-degree reckless homicide, use of a dangerous weapon. Count 2, first-degree recklessly endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon. And count 3, first-degree intentional homicide or homicide, use of a dangerous weapon.
Yeah, so these are lesser charges that still carry hefty penalties, but they allow the jury to be able. Now, they didn't have an issue with bringing those charges in because I think that they really think that they've gotten off. When I looked at this, I was like, the prosecution is missing something huge here. The law is the law. And of course, we say that it was legal, and there's a lot that has happened in our nation that is legal, but may not necessarily be fair, Rob.
There's some more here too for these count charges here, just to list them real quick here.
Go ahead.
What is that? Count 3 is where I left off here. Count 4, They got for first degree intentional use of homicide, use of a dangerous weapon, count 5. Attempt first degree intentional homicide, use of a dangerous weapon. They're basically the same thing here. Possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under 18 is count 6. And last but not least, count 7. Failure to comply with an emergency order from state or local government.
All right. So these additional charges. So the big issue was provocation. I think that that's huge. In the closing arguments, we saw the prosecution really drive that point home. Now, I want to get to this because the judge has been the center of attention for this trial. Be it quirky or whatever you might call it, the way that he has handled this courtroom has brought a lot of ire from a lot of people that are part of the criminal justice system, lawyers and attorneys and defense people. We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, the judge's name is Judge Bruce Schroeder.
And so you bring up one of the important pieces that I wanted to talk about. How does a defendant get to choose who is going to decide his fate? I've never seen this before in my life. I don't know if this is something that only, their particular Kenosha allows, or is this something that the judge is taking into his own hands? Because he has been treating, in my opinion, this Kyle Rittenhouse like he is his grandson. And, we're going to make sure my grandson gets a free trial. What did you think about the defense testimony? Because this kid cried on cue. I think he should get an Academy Award because he was there crying. However, I never saw a single tear. He's looking around the room to see who's paying attention.
Right.
Probably because they knew that eventually he's going to get to decide which of these jurors do I feel I'm able to connect with, and those are the ones I'm going to choose.
It's like a child when he's trying to decide which parent is going to feel better for him, in situations. Because my son used to do that with his mother and me. He'll go to his mom and say he can get her sympathy for it. If not, he'll come to me, and not realize he could not play each other against the other, which is what Kyle Rittenhouse was doing. Can he play the jury against the prosecution of this whole thing here?
I mean, I was watching. I was like, wow, I feel bad for this kid. You get caught up in the antics of the moment, and you sit there and he's clean shaven, no facial hair. Doesn't look like the kid that was out there with the AR rifle.
Oh, they clean up real good.
Yeah, you clean up really good. And so it's interesting. My question to you, Rob, do you think that this trial would have proceeded the same way?
Come on, better than
hold on, let me finish. The judge would have proceeded the same way, had the same types of issues and the same protections that we see taking place, had this been an African-American man that had shot a young African-American guy who had shot white.
I got two answers for that. Number one, had there been a black person who was the defendant, the answer would have been no. Number two, or had the judge been black and the child been white, the situation would have been a lot fairer than what we see today.
Okay.
So I look at it both ways that way. The judge,
So this gives us something for America to chew on.
Right.
And we have to look at this and say, how do we really feel about this?
Now, we've been here before, though.
We have, but let's get to this next charge because we see, young Rittenhouse fighting for his life up in the northern part of the country. And then as we head down to Georgia, we see I was going to say a horse of a different color, a different trial, Ahmaud Arbery, his murder trial taking place.
That touches me greatly because my son's a sportsman too. He jogs often, and I said,
and I was a runner. I know I don't look like it today, but I used to run.
That could have been my kid. When I first saw that story, that could have been my kid.
So for those of you who have been maybe under a rock or just, I don't know where you would not hear about this case, but Ahmaud Arbery was a young man that was running in his community, a neighboring community from where he lives, a community which is, I believe they tout 55% African Americans in this particular community. And there's a subdivision that was there that was being redeveloped. So there's some houses that are unfinished. He went in, took a look into the house, it's not finished. The home is still under construction, so there's nothing to take. And he left the home and he continues to jog on his way. In that process, he is then encountered by three of Georgia's hillbilly bobs, three white men in Georgia with shotguns in a pickup truck. This is like, if you were to talk stereotypical incidents in Georgia, the things that our grandparents and our, my parents and grandparents were talking about. My great grandmother, Mama Pearl, who was living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. These are the stories that I heard when I would go visit her as a young kid, 9 and 10 years old. These types of things. My grandfather hiding in cornfields because the Klan were out knocking on the door, setting crosses on fire in front of their homes. Here we have a young man in the year, in the 21st century that is running in his own community, a community which is, I think, 55% Black or 55%, very racially diverse community. He gets shot down because he should not be in our community.
Mm-hmm.
We're protecting our America, our streets. You're invading our community. You should not be here. It's that us versus them mentality that we saw exploited in such a horrific way, beginning, with this past election. And actually in 2016, we saw it begin. It never stopped. And we see that continuing on. So the jury selection, which is very interesting.
We're talking about Trayvon Martin, 2016.
Absolutely. We're supposed to be,
2016?
Yeah, it's been 2016, I think it was. We are supposed to have a jury that is a jury of our peers, should reflect the community in which we come from. And we see here, we have 11 white jurors that were put on this jury and one Black individual in this community, which is very racially diverse. So when we talk about equality in the system, go ahead, Rob.
Trayvon Martin's 2012.
2012. So it's been forever.
Right.
So we are now getting to a place, because they took a long time to bring charges against these men. And I think it was the social cry for justice. And we're still looking for something to be done with Breonna Taylor. We have not forgotten Breonna Taylor. Say her name. That's right, Breonna Taylor. But in this individual, so this case, this young man is there. We saw the defense attorney a few days ago make the appeal to the judge. We don't want these Black pastors coming in, trying to circumvent and overthrow and force a conviction in our case. Rob,
we don't want their influence, like Jesse Jackson. We don't want his influence.
And Jesse wasn't even in the house that day. But guess what? He was there a few days later. But Rob, when we hear this type of communication, this is 2021. As a more seasoned, older man than I am, what goes through your mind?
Oh, what goes through my mind. Obvious cover up. Obviously we're ashamed to admit what we're doing, right? So we don't want you to be a part of it. We don't want anyone else influenced. We want to do it the way we want to do it, so that there's no outside influence from those people. You people, us, meaning you and me. People like us.
Absolutely. And so this was another example. And the judge was like, "Listen, if you think that you're going to get a mistrial for these types of shenanigans, you might as well quit, because we're not going down that road for a mistrial for this." But I think that, and because there's also a mistrial that has been motioned in Kenosha
for the Rittenhouse thing,
which has not been dealt with. The judge is holding it. I don't know if he figures, hey, they're going to be, guilty. We're going to give a mistrial. It's just so unorthodox, right? We'll see what takes place. But with this Ahmaud Arbery case, that was, to me, it was horrific. It was confusing. It was sad. It was disheartening, Rob. As a young Black man who was raised in this country and had great hopes and dreams, and has had the opportunity to experience what I consider some of the best that this country has to offer. And that's why I say, when we have these conversations, many people say, you know what? Well, you're always talking about race. The reality of the situation is I recognize that the majority of our country, for the most part, are good intending Americans. And, but this is the thing that I want those of you that are listening. It's not enough to just be good intentioned. It's not enough to be good intending Americans. And, we go back to the statement that Angela Davis said, that it's not good enough to be, to not be racist, but you have to be an anti-racist.
Exactly.
So we need you all. And the only way that we can overcome these situations is that we find allies across the racial line, that we find civil rights movement. Yes, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Chavez, and all of these other names were all Jordan. All of these other names were so key to what was taking place. They were the leaders, but it was the allies. It was the president who understood that there needed to be a change in some things. It were the organizations across the world that were non-black, that were white Americans, that really brought the change to place. Because as the great Frederick Douglass says, that power never concedes itself. And so we have to be willing to work hard together. We need allies and individuals to lean in for that conversation. So we're waiting to see what happens. The prosecution is rested in the Ahmaud Arbery murder trial. It's going to be interesting to see what takes place. Now, this last piece, and I had to save this for last, Robin. I know we only got a few minutes, but this Unite the Right trial, I had to ask myself, what world was I in? This is the biggest, most chaotic, the craziest situation that I've ever seen in my life. There are hundreds of people here, it seems like, that are on trial. So many of these individuals that are a part of this have decided to defend themselves. We have seen defendants cross-examining other defendants and throwing them under the bus. This has just been crazy. But what we do understand, I've never seen anything like this in my life. They say that only a fool will defend himself. We got a whole bunch of fools that are a part of this trial process. So the Nazis, we understand that the victim here was Heather Heyer. She was the one that was murdered when they drove a car through the crowd, which was something that was talked about on the dark web. So now they're beginning to put the pieces of this puzzle together. There was a organizer that appeared to instruct the followers to mislead the law. They initially said that they were going to have 1,000 or more people. They then said, oh, we're not going to have that many people. It's going to be 300 people. So they were led to lie so that there would be less of a police presence, so there wouldn't be a need for barriers and streets to be locked off. They were told, as other organizers, on January 6th to go out there and that there would be hell to pay. Their words, not mine. All right. So we see this happening. This is America at its finest. This is truly a tale of two Americas. We have an America where justice is served, and we have another America where justice is yet being fought for. I pray that each of you that are listening would really take the time to lean into this conversation. Understand that we are not here to target or call anybody a racist or any of those things, but simply to stir up a conversation that you will continue to have after we're off the air. That is what this is about. United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. This is a tale of two Americas. Thank you guys for tuning in today. We'll see you next week with more race conversations.